RockAuthors.com.
Will you let me walk by myself, Lewis? It was the first time Lewis's hand was grasped at hers in an attempt to help herself up over a fallen trunk. She had heard Aasim chuckle from behind them, and she glares at his direction. The man and made a motion of zipping his mouth and continued strolling, suddenly very interested in his shoelaces. "I'm just worried, that's all," Lewis said, attempting to keep his distance and her as her request. "Are you feeling okay?" Clem chuckled herself despite herself, and she looked at her husband. "Like I told you a half an hour ago, I'm fine," she reminded him, patting his shoulder. "I'm not letting anything happen to the little guy." "Or girl," he added, smiling broadly. "You're really all hung up on that, huh?" Aasim said, finally having the courage to speak to them as he got caught up. "Dude, having a daughter would, make my own world," Lewis exclaimed, stumbling over his own words. "Yeah, but a boy is so much easier to deal with," Aasim argued. "Look at AJ for instance." "I'll have to give up the point to Aasim here," Clem put in, making Lewis turn her and frown. "A boy might be a little terror when he's younger, but once a girl gets to puberty, we'll be dealing with a whole lot another level." "Okay, you guys are crazy," the freckled man said, shaking his head. "Plus, we aren't that great when we hit puberty," he said, gesturing at Aasim and himself. "Are you sure you really ever hit puberty?" teased Aasim. Both he and Clementine laughed, and Lewis rolled his eyes. Though he didn't really care, it had been exactly a week since he found out that he was going to be a father, and his election had not quite vanished yet. The sun was already at its highest, and the warm feeling of the spring weather was washing over them like a cloth. After grueling winter, they endured that this was a welcome change of pace, as they finally found the wooden fence through which Clem had crawled a week earlier. Aasim did rather a heavy looking board out of the way and let Clementine and Lewis through. After a quick scan of the perimeter, Lewis held the board high enough so the other man could crawl through the gap. We really should scout the area a bit more," Aasim suggested, looking around. "If the convenience store still had stuff in it, who knows what other stuff we might find." "I agree," said Clem, nodding. "I'll go check the rest of the store. I didn't get a chance to sightsee last time," she chuckled. "All right, I'll go in and check the south park of the neighborhood," Lewis suggested, running his hand through his hair. Clementine kissed him on the cheek before setting off forward into the store ahead of her. Rotting carcasses of dead animals lying on decaying corpses. She had heard Lewis mumble something to Aasim as she entered and started walking the aisles, examining the shelves. Most of the stuff we saw were empty containers of various products, long expired or ransacked in the first lootings. When the first world went into hell, birds flew through the cracks of the windows, perching themselves on the high beams of the store. 20 minutes of useless searching later, she had only found 2 cans of peaches along with half a bag of baby formula. "Hope this doesn't go back before she's born," she muttered to herself, startled when another voice followed hers. "So you think it's going to be a girl?" Aasim said behind her, deftly catching the bag that fell out of her hands in midair. "Damn it, Aasim!" she swore, slapping him on the shoulder. "You scared the crap out of me." "Sorry, I was just checking in." "Did Lewis put you up to this?" she asked irritably. "Nope, I'm just worried as him," he promised. "Besides, we wouldn't want anything to happen to Lewis Jr. here. Believe me, if it's a boy, we're not calling him Lewis Jr., she said. "One of him is enough." "Amen to that." Chuckling, they kept rummaging through the empty boxes, coming up empty most of the time. Once they cleared the store, they left the little supplies that they found in the box near the entrance, as so as they dare not to forget them. As they walked out of the store and headed towards a broken-down house, Aasim sighed. "You know, Lewis is just looking for you, right?" he said, casting a sideways glance at her. "I know," she admitted. A squirrel perched herself on the dumpster, staring at them as they went by. "It just gets annoying at times. He knows I can take care of myself, right?" He does, Asim assured her. But I think he's just scared. Scared? Why? Well, he's always been pretty terrified on what happens to you, he explained, frowning. Don't tell him I said that. I won't, don't worry, she said, smiling at him. They entered the house through the large gaping hole that led to the living room. Planks were scattered all around the place, rotten splinters sticking out of odd angles. Clem spotted a teddy bear lying on the moldy mattress in the corner of the room, and half of a children's book, most of its pages scattered on the floor. What I'm saying is he's now doubly terrified of what would happen to you and the baby, so just cut him some slack. I guess I should, she admitted, kneeling beside the old mattress and taking the teddy bear. Its ear on the left had been ripped off. It's a synthetic fur that was spotted with mud and grime. She turned it back to her hands, imagining the small hands of a baby holding it, chuckling at nothing in particular. Hey, Asim, she said, suddenly standing up. Yeah? He called out from the kitchen. Where he'd been searching, he came out from holding 3 cans of beans and almost dropped them when he saw a tear from Clem's eyes. Clementine never cried. What is it? What if I'm a terrible mother? Taken back by the question, Asim shook his head. He stepped forward, setting the cans on the splinted coffee table, and placed a hand on her shoulder. How could you ask yourself that? Have you seen AJ? That's different, she argued back. Looking down and fumbling with the teddy bear ears, Asim took note of it. How so? He inquired. Generally integrated, he leaned against the wall and studied her expression. I didn't know what I was doing half the time, she began. And his first 5 years, I had a lot of help. Looking up to the first people and looking at the eyes with Asim, she said, I don't know if this is the best idea. Pursing his lips, Asim sat beside her on the mattress. He looked at the teddy bear in her hands and was reminded of one when he was a child. He had been called Fuzzy, and he would have had him every night. His mother said it was his lucky bear. I don't think you had that much of a choice in that matter, he said slowly, attempting to contradict the route that Louis would have taken. These things just happen. It doesn't make it any easier, she said bitterly, placing a hand on her stomach. I've traveled with a pregnant woman before, and it always ends up badly. I don't think you ever told me about that, Asim said slowly. Rebecca, who is AJ's mom, she began, closing her eyes. She was in a lot of pain. She got too weak to walk and ended up dying from blood loss shortly after giving birth to AJ. I'm really sorry, Clem. Look, I can't say I'm an expert on this stuff, he said, looking sideways at Clem. But you both know you will have a full support on anything you might need. Thank you, Asim. That means a lot to me. And as for your fears as a mother, he added, nodding, I think you should have that kind of conversation with your husband. Clementine felt a chill rising through her spine at the mention of the word husband. She had been accustomed to be married, although it was a pleasant sensation to say the least. She stood up, Asim following her lead, and set Teddy on the coffee table. The sun was slowly beginning to make its way to the horizon, a sweet orange blue hue bathed in the sky. The outline of the moon was visible and was already on the eastern side of the sky, awaiting for the sun's departure. As they walked out of the store, into the store, they were greeted by a smiling Louis who was holding a box of cans in his arms. Gaping at him, Clementine said, Where did you get all those? I found a hoarder's stash of food down the road, he informed them, gesturing them to a rather run-down house at the end of the street with his head. Had to take care of the dude's corpse, but it was worth it. That's awesome, Lou, Asim exclaimed, taking the box from him. I'll take that, and you can get the other supplies we gathered earlier. Wow, he's really such a gentleman, Louis muttered to Clem, who chuckled. They followed the other man through the parking lot. Asim and a few other places flew ahead of him. Louis lifted the board for Asim, keeping up from Clem. After you, milady. Shut up, she said, rolling her eyes, trying to hide the smile that crept on her face as she crawled through the gap. As they walked, Clem noticed that Asim's getting farther and further away from them, picking up his pace. The leaves rustled under his weight, and then the crickets around them had begun and their nightly song to accompany them. Sighing, she turned to her husband. Hey, Lou. Yeah? he asked, offering her a half smile. She loved it when he did that, almost as if he was ready and he knew what he was thinking and was bracing it for himself for what she would say. How do you feel all about this? She whispered, having her hands instinctively going to her stomach. She thought by now that she had a bump, but so far there wasn't much. After finding out about her pregnancy, she started to read every book available on the subject. As Asim had put it, they were not taking any chances. Louis tried to let out a tired breath, casting his eyes upwards into the black void of the sky. The shining stars were like diamonds in the sky, untroubled by the struggles of man. He searched that void, looking up for answers that would not come looking down. He smiled. I'm happy. I didn't think you would be, Clementine noted, actually glad that this had been his reaction. I thought you'd freak out and run away or something. Oh, I'm fully freaking out, he assured her, nodding vigorously. I'm just a master of hiding my emotions. I see, she mused, chuckling. So you're not really running out on us. Clem, it pains me to say that you even consider me of doing that, he said, shooting at her with a fleeting glance. I'll be there with you for every step of the way. I'm glad, she whispered, stepping over a tree and brushing Louis' shin away, Louis's helping hand at the same time. They fell silent for a while, enjoying the beautiful, clear night, crickets still surrounding them. The only other sound other than their footsteps was softly crunching the leaves that the winter had so desperately been blown away. They had still had ways to go until they reached the school. Clem realized ruefully that she had heard a sigh to her left, and she turned to Louis. What is it? Nothing, it's just, he trailed off. His eyes were somewhere far away that she couldn't quite place. When she stared at them, his chocolate brown eyes, they felt like a pool that she was being sucked into, the depths completely unknown to her. Sometimes she even wondered how his mind worked after all those fateful memories from his childhood, safely stored away in fear that would be unleashed. Just what? Sometimes I wonder when you even be with me to begin with, he blurted with his walls crumbling down his face and scrunching up into a frown. Before she could retort, he cut her off. I know you love me, and I love you too, but this whole new, different thing, how do we even know I'm not going to be a horrible dad? How can you say that? Clem asked and exclaimed. Asim's words were coming back to her at the moment, the truth of them being clearer to her. She stopped and grabbed Louis by the shoulder, halting him before they stepped over one of the ropes as they set up traps near the school. Ahead of them, Asim just kept walking. How do you know I won't become my dad? Excuse me? I've told you about my dad, he trailed off, frowning. The faint of the moonlight surrounded half of his face in darkness. How can I be sure I won't turn into my dad? He was a lousy father, and I'll probably be an even lousier one. Closing her eyes, Clem reached out for him, and his fingers entwining. She drew small circles on the palm of his hand, shaking her head. Louis, she began, you are the most kind-hearted person I've ever met. I said a month ago, and I'm saying it again. You've been a huge influence on AJ and me, and I cannot think of anyone more different than your dad. The freckled man looked up, and a faint smile crept on his face. His brown eyes met with her amber ones, and then they found them, and sincerely he found the understanding. You really think so? Chuckling, Clem stood up on her tiptoes and kissed the top of his nose. Absolutely, doofus, she assured him. We'll work on this stuff together like we always do. Together, he repeated, nodding and planting a kiss on the back of her hand. They heard Asim calling for them up ahead, and they quickly got caught up with him. Standing by the gates of the school from outside, the walls now looked more sturdier from when Clem had arrived there. A couple of years ago, while scavenging, they did find this surprising amount of barbed wire in the abandoned warehouse, and it now decorated most of the perimeter of the school. 10, open up the gate, Asim called. A loud thud was heard from the other side, and the barred gates slowly inched away from them. Once they were through, Louis and Asim helped 10 close it back up again, and Clementine sat down near the boxes where they found on the table. She examined the food closely, making every mental inventory of her profit. I don't know about you, but don't think peaches and beans are good for the baby, Louis said from behind her, a frown placed in his usual smile. We need to start stocking up on baby food, and fast. I know, she sighed, looking at him and then lowering her head. This is already getting difficult, and we're not even close to the hardest part yet. We're not? He asked, his voice raising an octave and causing Clementine to roll her eyes. You didn't even read those books that Sim gave us the other night, right? Clementine said to roll her as she rolled her eyes. You rolled her eyes. He stuttered. They're in our nightstand, he guessed, grinning cheekily at her. They're not even in our room, she said, chuckling. Don't worry, I'll catch you up tonight. Basically, we need a load of stuff, not only food. She lamented, sighing heavily. She leaned to him, wrapping her slender arms around his waist. Louis, not using her head as a headrest, she usually did when she was tired, and the soft thumping of Louis's heartbeat was a smoothing tune to her ears. How in the world are we going to get that stuff? He mused, sighing. I don't know, she whispered, closing her eyes. Suddenly an idea lodged herself in the head. It was so simple. She didn't know how she waited this long to figure out. Damn it, I'm so stupid. I think that's my tile, thank you very much, he choked, startling her by his sudden jump. Shut up, she said, quickly racing to the admin building without saying another word. He stood there for a moment, watching her disappear into the building until he sprung into action. He followed her up to the stairs, rushing into the principal's office. What is it? He called out to her, watching her frankly search the desk in the corner of the room. Here it is, she exclaimed, producing one of the drawers of the map of West Virginia. She then set it back at the desk and flattened it out, searching for something. What is it, Clem? Louis repeated in frustration, following her fingers as she browsed it. This! She exclaimed, pointing at the small dot on the map, looking back up at Louis, a glint of hope lighting up her golden eyes. Louis stared at her for a moment, lost in them, blinking rapidly when she realized that she was addressing him. He looked at the map. Beneath her finger had a dot with a single name written on it. Richmond.
Why, hello there, my little pretties. It's me, the Shadow Lioness. I hope you all enjoy my video of creepypasta. So, without further ado, if you liked the video, please leave a like. And if you want to survive my cave of terror, please hit the subscribe button down below. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. Donate to my Patreon when you can. And the only way you're going to survive me in the cave is you're going to have to sub to me and press the bell for notifications so you'll get to know when I upload. Well, without further ado, my little pretties, I'll see you in the next video. Sweet dreams, my little pretties.